Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron, and Olaf Scholz, these are the people who we're told are our leaders. They make the big decisions, change the lives of millions with the stroke of a pen, and they're the people who we elected into office. But when you look a little bit closer, it quickly becomes apparent that they're not the ones who are really in control. In fact, they're nowhere near the most powerful people in the world. So then who are these people behind the shadows? Who really are the most powerful people in the world, running society behind the scenes? Well, to understand this, we're going to take a journey through modern society, uncovering the hidden mechanics of power and unmasking the people who are truly at the top of the pyramid. At the first level, we have elected officials, the leaders of the free world. These are the men and women who rise through the political ranks, take control of their party, and eventually the government entirely. They're the people on the ballot papers, the only part of the system we have a direct say over. But naturally, everything here isn't as it seems. When you consider the power that these people actually wield, it's incredibly limited. The way politicians are selected and pushed into the public eye plays a large role. Within political parties, the way they select their leaders isn't based on qualities you would necessarily want. To get ahead, first you need to join the selective club to begin with. It mostly involves being born into a rich family, going into the best private schools, and existing within their world to begin with. That gets any prospective politician's foot in the door. Next, they need to prove to people already within the party that they're going to easily assimilate into the group and conform. They need to say the right things, be a good puppet, shake the right hands, and generally just be a good sycophant. And once they're good and they've conformed enough in their chosen party, they can rise up the ranks and choose a faction within the political party itself. Eventually, by making enough promises and choosing the right friends, a politician can put themselves at the head of one of these factions and make a play for dominance. If it succeeds, they'll guarantee themselves a place in power, or at least a shot at contesting an election. But all of this training turns them into an instrument of their party. Their political allies are the ones who put them in this place and can also easily remove them if they get unhappy, which means that whatever they actually want to do is always constrained by what their party wants, and the party does what the people want. And the party is completely controlled by outside forces. These politicians will never actually be able to break through and make systematic changes because their own position and power is completely dependent on the stability of that same system. The other qualities they'll develop are the same as an actor or a showman. They need to be able to convince enough people that they're different, that they'll really make a change in the world. For many, Trump seemed to be like an outsider, someone who was going to clean the swamp, change the system, and bring back power to the people. And he was an exception. He was able to become the president almost entirely through his showmanship and charisma. But eventually Trump found out the truth. The kind of political power that presidents and prime ministers wield is even more limited than just the constraints of your own party. In the US, for example, a president can't make new laws without the approval of a wider government, or even declare a war. They can't oust their political opponents, they can't really dictate what the police or army do, or exert any direct control of one part of their government. Instead, their power is almost as limited as a figurehead. Outside of special cases like a war or a massive crisis, they can't make decisions on their own. They're also constantly ruling under the shadow of the next election. And so if they make themselves too unpopular, they'll lose the next election, or if they plan long term, they won't get the short term results that the public loves. Or if they try to change anything too dramatically, they'll just be abandoned by the party before it even happens. This is why these people are at the lowest level of our pyramid of power. Elected officials in real democracies, they represent the interests of their party, rather than themselves. They can't make large decisions without approval. They also occupy the only level of the power pyramid which is actually at the mercy of the masses. So what really drives these people? Other than their own party politics, it's money. And depressingly, politicians come rather cheap though compared to other business expenses. According to a leaked footage of a BlackRock employee, some senators are as cheap as $10,000. In fact, political lobbying is a $4 billion market in the US, which isn't actually that much money considering how effective it is. The opioid epidemic is just one example of how far these companies can take it. By paying off a few politicians and bureaucrats, Purdue Pharma got away with selling heroin in a pill for decades.
Purdue Pharma needed the FDA to approve. They'd spent $30 million developing this drug, but they were all in and they needed this drug, and to keep the company alive, they needed the FDA to approve it. And this guy was like, I can't approve this. This is heroin in a pill. They took him to a hotel on the East Coast. Purdue Pharma took Curtis Wright of the FDA, spent a couple of days in this hotel room. They came out of the hotel room with an approval, with the language, OxyContin, quote, is believed to be non-addictive. A year later, he leaves the FDA, where he's making probably 50 grand a year. Where does he go work? Purdue Pharma.
Ugh.
For $400,000+ a year.
And their aggressive marketing and lies were the beginning of the whole thing, and estimates for the total amount of deaths caused by the opioid epidemic range from 400 to 600,000. While regular criminals get locked up for life, the Sacklers, the family behind Purdue, got to keep their billions and their freedom. So if money is what drives these people and translates to political power, then it should be as simple as seeing who has the most money. And it's there that the true power lies. And so that would mean that people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos are the most powerful people in the world, right? Well, it's not just the money. The old saying is true, and knowledge is power. Well then, they are by far the most powerful. By pioneering and taking ownership of social media, tech billionaires have gained control over the way people communicate with each other, and what people find out about the world. By controlling the algorithms, they pick the presidents. But more than that, their companies make their profits through the information they gather about you. By analyzing every second you spend on one of their apps, they can build up a massive profile on what interests you, what your hobbies are, and all your other personal information. There aren't any limits. They can find out your health data, your location, your financial information, and they can even predict what you're gonna do next. Google often knows what women are pregnant before they even know, and starts targeting them with specific adverts.
Target's advanced advertising system even knew about a teenage girl's pregnancy before she could break the news to her own father. And he found out when the store sent her maternity deals in the mail.
So if knowledge is power, the answer seems pretty simple. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because to figure out the tech world's true place in the power structure, we need to look a little deeper. Knowledge isn't simply power. You need the ability to act on that knowledge and take advantage of it to benefit a tool. Instead, we can properly explain the relationship using the French philosopher Foucault and his idea of power knowledge. In the natural world, it's a simple truth that might makes right. The larger animals eat the smaller ones. The predators eat the prey, and it's clear who the top dog is. Power works this way in modern society as well, or at least to an extent. The government, which you can usually find in the largest, most imposing buildings in the capital, use their police and army to impose their laws. But ruling through brute strength isn't what keeps a society running. Ruling solely through violence inevitably leads to revolution, once your subjects sense weakness. If you want a long-lasting society, then you need people to police themselves. The modern state wants conformity above everything else, and to see how the state makes people conform, Foucault started in the school system. It's generally accepted that the school system's purpose is to give people the knowledge they need to get by in society, but this doesn't explain the rigid structures and doctrines that define them. Children don't learn any better if you make them wake up way too early, put them in ordered rows in classrooms, demasculated, and tracking their day in a tight schedule. Instead, these measures are put in place to train kids to work within the power structures of society. The routine mirrors the workday at a factory. In fact, this is where most school systems come from people like Andrew Carnegie, who pioneered this system by pouring untold millions into these schools. The schedule then trains them to segregate their lives into a timetable of work. The bell that rings for every period is just a version of the factory whistle. Kids are then rewarded with symbolic gestures for obedience, just like in the workplace. Each specific subject gets 1 hour a day at best, but every lesson teaches children conformity and to surrender to the system and get in the factory. This isn't necessarily a great evil. There will always be power dynamics and hierarchies. They're not going anywhere, they're throughout nature. A society full of unindoctrinated nonconformists would never function at all. But the system isn't just in place for the greater good of society, it furthers the desires of the powerful, much more than the children who are subject to it. So where's knowledge's place in all of this? Well, according to Foucault, within school and in wider society, knowledge is completely controlled by power. This is the essence of power knowledge. The fact that what's true is dictated by power. Powerful control was taught in the lessons, what the textbooks say and which aspects of the world are worth teaching people about. The news and the media, the algorithms control the knowledge. They decide whether something gets through or whether something is misinformation. And the most important part of power knowledge is how it relates to people. When people leave each level of school, they get turned into a piece of knowledge. You become an amalgamation of your exam results and your record of behavior. These are what determine your place and role within society. And if you're indoctrinated enough, they become part of your self-identity. The more detailed and extensive the system's knowledge of you is, the more easily it can control you. This is the role that tech billionaires play. They are the brokers of this knowledge, selling it to the rest of the powerful for a profit. Google and Meta's platforms are the next level in this. They can play on your desires and sell you the right products to keep you in the cycle of working and spending. They know what keeps you entertained in your off time, feeding you the right content to keep you docile and complacent. More than this, they control the ways people get information and build knowledge in the modern world. But as for the actual power within the pyramid, these tech billionaires aren't all that high up. They're new to the game, and they're still at the mercy of more powerful institutions and people. They don't have the legitimacy and reputation that people higher up in the power structure have. They can't change the nature of society they live in. The only thing they have going for them is their ludicrous wealth. But even this is somewhat of an illusion. There's people that are far more wealthy than the tech billionaires, but don't just take it from me, they'll readily admit it.
Being at a net worth of 230 billion roughly, being perceived as the richest person on earth.
Well, I think Putin is significantly richer than me.
You really do, yeah?
Yeah.
But money is only as good as what you can use it for. When combined with political power though, it can achieve almost anything, and Putin has both, but his actual net worth is pretty much immeasurable. It's doubtful there's really a line or a clear distinction between his wealth and Russia's. People point to his luxury villas, yachts and other symbols of wealth to try and get an answer, but they represent a small percentage of Russia's GDP that he siphoned off for his own comfort. What he really owns is Russia itself, and the 20% of the world's natural gas and oil production that comes with it. I mean, Russia's revenue from the export of fossil fuels was 700 million euros every single day of December of 2022. This is down around 300 million from before the new Western sanctions, and Putin has been in complete control of the system for 2 decades, so who knows how much he's actually taken? You would never know, and it's a system that's been designed by Putin himself to give him and his collection of cronies nearly all of the wealth. The bottom 99.8% of Russia's population have less wealth than Putin and his 500 richest oligarchs together. And so you can be sure that he's richer than Musk or Zuckerberg. But Putin doesn't just have power over his massive fortune, he's got the power to direct one of the largest and most powerful countries in the world, and his grip on the country has never been stronger. Dreams of Western sanctions putting an end to his regime, or at least the war, have completely fallen apart. Historically, economic concerns rarely, if ever, stop a war from happening, and it has to get pretty dire before they end a war. There's countless examples of countries making bread out of sawdust or not making enough food at all before they capitulated. And in this war of attrition, Russia is in by far the most comfortable spot. Ukraine's national debt is now projected to rise to 95% of their GDP by 2024. Russia's national debt is around 20% of their GDP in comparison. Nothing shakes up an economy like war. It sets off a chain reaction that eats into everyone's bottom line. Prices go up, stocks get shaky, and no matter who prevails, it could be years before some countries get back to normal. Millions could face food or energy insecurity this winter due to the invasion of Ukraine, and all over the world, what's left of the upper middle class is struggling to make ends meet. The uncertainty is shaking up global markets. In the last 3 quarters, Warren Buffett's dumped over $33 billion in stocks. But you don't have to subject yourself to this volatility. Even today, thousands of you guys have been seeking that opportunity for yourselves, with today's sponsor, Masterworks. Masterworks recently extended its streak of positive returns, selling a Cicely Brown piece for a 77% net annualized return. That's 16 straight. Masterworks has over $800 million in assets under management and over 800,000 users on the platform, and they're making headlines after launching their largest offering yet, a $36 million Basquiat offering. Paintings have sold out within minutes, and you can still skip the waitlist and get started straight away. Just click the link in the description.